Happy Friday, troop. Welcome to a special edition of our Friday Fireside. If you've been following the Sean Ryan situation at all, you've probably seen that Congressman Dan Crenshaw is now threatening legal action because someone with an actual platform is starting to call him out on some of his actions. You know, I've been publicly critical of Crenshaw for years now because of his record in Congress. You know, it just consistently raises the same questions over and over and over. Who is actually benefiting from his time in office? You know, this isn't really a response to the podcast feud. It's more of a review of documented actions. You know, his stock trades during the COVID crisis, his heavy reliance on his elite donors, a culture of high dollar fundraising, and he just had an incident on official travel that was serious enough to draw real consequences. You know, none of this is speculation. It's all on the record. So for our Friday Fireside, we're going to take a look at Congressman Dan Crenshaw. In March 2020, as the COVID-19 pandemic triggered a complete market collapse and Congress began drafting what would later become the largest emergency spending package in U.S. history, Congressman Dan Crenshaw was actively trading just a few stocks. His financial disclosures show that during this period, Crenshaw purchased shares in several major corporations, including Amazon, Boeing, other airline companies, and some energy-related firms. These sectors were directly affected by the pandemic and in some cases stood to benefit significantly from federal relief. Changes in consumer behavior, infrastructure spending were all going to be boosted. Under the Stock Act, members of Congress are required to disclose stock trades within 45 days. Crenshaw didn't do this. He didn't meet this requirement. Several of his March 2020 trades were disclosed months later, well outside the legal reporting window. He later amended his filings and he paid a small late fee. No criminal charges were filed. Late disclosure violations are common for Congress. You know, half of our Congress are millionaires right now. They're operating on a completely different level than you and me. However, the issue is really not legality alone. It's at a moment when millions of Americans are losing jobs, businesses are closing, people's retirement accounts were collapsing, and yet we have a sitting congressman with access to internal legislative briefings actively trading corporate stocks, and then he still failed to report those trades on time. You know, it's obvious that Congressman Dan Crenshaw has no problem profiting off of the despair of everyday Americans. He's in an entirely different reality than we are, yet still claims to be the for the people candidate. Dan also happens to be one of the Republican Party's most successful fundraisers. Campaign finance data compiled by OpenSecrets.org shows that a significant portion of Crenshaw's financial support comes from institutional and high wealth sectors rather than small dollar grassroots donors. In recent election cycles, his top contributing industries have included securities and investment firms, real estate interests, and energy-related donors. Hedge funds and investment management companies have also played a notable role in his fundraising network. You know, he's further benefited from large contributions tied to joint fundraising committees, including six-figure donations from major financial firms. These structures allow high-value donors to maximize their influence while legally routing money across multiple political accounts. In addition to private finance and real estate interests, Crenshaw has received substantial backing from pro-Israel political action committees. Groups affiliated with AIPAC and other related organizations have ranked among his most consistent and significant contributors. His voting record on foreign military aid aligns pretty close with these donor priorities, particularly in regard to Israel and U.S. defense spending abroad. For Dan, war is good business. Crenshaw's fundraising practices have not been without consequence. In 2022, the Federal Election Commission fined his campaign for accepting excessive and prohibited contributions. The violations involved more than $200,000 in improperly handled donations and required refunds and some penalties. As a whole, Crenshaw's donor profile places him firmly within Washington's institutional funding class. His political viability depends far more on large contributors and organized interests than on the financial support of average constituents. He's detached from the reality of everyday Americans a long time ago. This funding reality provides critical context for understanding the policy priorities that he's championed while he's in office. It's been clear that his priorities are only for his donors and that the mechanisms that are lining his pockets. The current scrutiny surrounding Crenshaw began when a question raised publicly by Navy SEAL veteran and podcaster Sean Ryan. He simply asked, how does a sitting congressman earning a congressional salary finance an increasingly elite political lifestyle? That question was raised and gained traction after Crenshaw promoted his 40th birthday celebration as a large-scale campaign event held at the Houston nightclub Clay, featuring internationally known DJ Steve Aoki. The event was advertised as his biggest party yet and was directly linked to a campaign fundraising page. Supporters were encouraged to attend and donate as part of the celebration. Booking a high-profile performer such as Steve Aoki is a pretty expensive undertaking, and it reflects the financial capacity of Crenshaw's campaign operation. It also placed attention on the contrast between Crenshaw's elite lifestyle and the economic reality facing many Americans. It must be nice to be insulated from the economic pressures experienced by the public he supposedly represents. When Ryan questioned how such events are financed and who ultimately benefits from them, Crenshaw responded with a private message that later became pretty public. Rather than addressing the substance of the question, Crenshaw's feelings were hurt, so he threatened legal action. When you look at our fine congressman, these financial details tell a familiar story. A congressman who profits during an American crisis and relies on elite donors to stay viable and supports his elite lifestyle. He's not operating in the same reality as the people he represents. This is not an outlier. It is the modern model of our Congress. They're insulated and self-enriching. It's a club, and you and me aren't invited. While Americans are told to accept austerity, to delay and sacrifice, their representatives move freely through a system that rewards power and loyalty to money. You can find plenty of examples on both sides of the aisle. Our politicians rake it all in together and leave us to squabble over the scraps. Aside from being yet another corrupt politician, Dan also likes causing international incidents. This past August, Dan Crenshaw participated in an official congressional delegation trip to Mexico focused on security and cartel-related issues. During the meeting, with Mexican officials reporting later revealed that a crude joke was made that caused a female present to feel uncomfortable. According to multiple outlets citing Punchbowl News, Crenshaw responded by raising a toast in agreement to the remark. The incident did not remain confined to this room. U.S. intelligence officials stationed in Mexico City reportedly found the conduct concerning enough that a report was sent back to CIA headquarters in Langley. They documented what occurred. The matter was then escalated internally within Congress. Punchbowl News reported that House Intelligence Committee Chair Rick Crawford responded by barring Crenshaw from taxpayer-funded international travel for a period of 90 days. Multiple outlets, including the Texas Tribune and the Houston Chronicle, corroborated the reporting, and noting that the move reflected internal disciplinary action by committee leadership. Crenshaw has denied being banned, calling all the reporting just clickbait. He argued that the toast was taken out of context, yada, 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 but he's not denied the incident occurred. Punchbowl has stood by their reporting so far. No formal public sanction was announced, and Crenshaw ultimately retained his committee seat. Of course, as is often the case in Congress, accountability never actually happens. Things are always handled behind closed doors and without any direct consequences. For most Americans, particularly those in the military or federal service, conduct that embarrasses a delegation and is enough to warrant reporting would have immediate and lasting repercussions. In this case, the outcome was a brief internal restriction and a public denial. It's pretty clear that members of Congress operate under a different standard than us regular Americans. They live in a different reality than the rest of us. Dan Crenshaw is not unique. He is representative. What his record exposes is a deeper failure. We currently have a Congress that increasingly functions as a private club. Public trust is treated as expendable. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are told to wait for change every 4 years that never comes. We have children going to bed hungry in this nation every night. We have our military veterans sleeping under bridges. American workers wait for wages to actually catch up so they can pretend that one day they'll be able to afford a home. Everything in this country is met with the same response. There's just no money, unless it benefits donors of war. This is not a partisan problem. It's a structural one. A system designed to reward loyalty upward instead of responsibility downward. A government that has slowly drifted from representation into self-preservation. This is the natural result of a political culture that has forgotten who it works for. History shows that no system corrects itself without pressure. Transparency is not granted, it's demanded. Accountability does not begin behind closed doors. It begins when citizens stop accepting the excuses and start insisting that public office once again means public service. That reckoning is not radical, it's overdue.